Dear students, GPS CLAT Academy at Gyanodaya, a senior secondary school at Sikar, supports its students in their CLAT preparation. We have started a lecture series which will be delivered to you on a daily basis on YouTube. The lecture series revolves around discussion of mock papers. You can request us for the concerned mock papers. If you intend to join us in our daily discussions, you are most welcome.
The article is a very thought-provoking article, and basically it posits a question to us on whether taking a medicine for can alleviate the pain of stomachache. The answer is no. You can't cure a fever by taking the medicine for stomachache or vice versa, right? So the problem that the US is facing at present, according to the article, is because the dollar acts as a US reserve currency. Everybody in the US feels that the Americans have lost and the other countries are on the verge of winning, particularly Korea, South Korea, particularly Taiwan, particularly China. All these countries and Japan, of course. All these countries, the the economic leadership is shifting. That shift is too difficult for the US to absorb. And this is the first salvo they have fired. This is the second salvo they have fired. First salvo was fired during the Trump's first presidency. So this is an adjustment, sort of adjustment blues, you can say. So what is the adjustment and what is the problem? The problem is that the US dollar is a global reserve currency. Now, global reserve currency means it is always in demand. That is to say, every country would want a pie of the cake. They would want to store dollars because it helps them conduct foreign exchange. Foreign helps them conduct foreign trade, which is always conducted in terms of gold or an equivalent gold, equivalent currency in the international market, which is valued against the gold, and that is the US dollar. So every country wants to have the US dollar. And in that process, what happens is the US dollar prices keep going up. Even if the prices are not supported by a strong economic performance by the United States, still the dollar prices will keep moving up and up and up. So the United States has lost its world trade share and it is presently 13%, whereas China's trade share is presently um, China's present trade share seems to be 14%, which is more than that of the United States. Therefore, if you look at the economic center of gravity, the economic center of gravity has shifted to China, and it is away from the US. Now, but the US doesn't want that the US dollar should not be the global reserve currency. Still, because they can buy almost anything from anywhere if the US dollar is overvalued. They want that benefit with them. They want the economic influence with them. But at the same time, they don't want to, you know, they don't want to work on the central problem. The central problem is overvaluation of the dollar. Now, overvaluation of the dollar can be resolved by if you sit across the table and tell the countries that you have to devalue your currencies, and you have to devalue you have to devalue the dollar. You cannot overvalue it. You can't keep you keep your currency at an artificial level so as to benefit your economy. You have to let the level be decided freely and openly by market forces, and not by an artificial keeping an artificial exchange rate, an opaque exchange rate mechanism to the detriment of the US. You can't do that. That is where the crux of the problem lies. That overvaluation of the dollar is harming the US interests, and therefore uh, you have to work on that. You have to have an accord on that. That there must be some agreement among the trade partners that valuation of the currency is not hijacked. It is not fixed by law, but it is fixed by the forces of demand and supply, so that the reality is reflected, and not that the country's currency is manipulated by the central bank of that country to favor that country, and to the detriment of the United States. So that kind of exercise has not been carried out, but the exercise which has been carried out is imposition of tariffs. Now, if you want to keep your currency as a global reserve currency, then you must have a matching economic performance also. If you don't have a matching economic performance and still go on keeping your country as your currency as a global reserve currency, it is bound to have problems in the longer, or um, sooner or later it is bound to backfire. And since the US has lost, it has become a net importing country instead of being a net exporting country. It doesn't have any surpluses. It has trade deficit, which goes into trillions of debt. So, so what exactly is to be done? There are two sets of opinions. One set of opinion thinks that you should be working on the overvaluation of the dollar with the trade partners. Then another set of theorists who back President Trump, uh, they say that look, if you have the recourse to tariffs, then countries will be forced to devalue because they will absorb the shock of the tariffs. This is what they are talking about. Now, what happens if they don't? If they don't absorb the shock of tariffs, then the only thing that happens is the inflation in the United States rises. It does not solve any problem. It creates uh, uh, another problem to be resolved by another set of measures, which will be like misdiagnosing the problem and giving a wrong medicine, and hence the instead of alleviating the stomach pain, it will aggravate the stomach pain. That kind of thing. I hope this is clear to you. Is this clear to you? Does it make sense to you? Yes or no? Well, the article is slightly complicated, so I just want to make sure. Usually, I don't ask, but today I think it is essential to ask whether that what I have stated that makes sense to you. Yes, Tanishka, what is your response? Do you understand what I am saying?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right then. All right then. I need not spend much time on this because uh, all of you very well appreciate what I have stated. I was thinking I had become a little too theoretical, so kids might not have understood. But then you are in that is the benefit of reading the article, having a pre-read of the article. Then even if you become theoretical, the kids understand. That is the best part, and you immediately know. Anyway, which scenario? I'm on question number 3. Which scenario most weakens the argument that reciprocal tariffs boost US Treasury revenue without harming consumers? So, weakening the argument that reciprocal tariffs boost Treasury revenue without harming. So, if the inflation rises, then this will show that it is harming the US consumers, right? And if the inflation doesn't rise, then it shows that it really doesn't harm the US consumers. Study showing in US inflation rose by full tariff rate with no exchange rate adjustment. So this proof that tariff revenues were misallocated within the treasury. This is tangential evidence that China retaliated with matching tariffs. This also seems to be tangential. Reports of higher domestic saving rates. This seems neither here nor there. Chalo, yeah. Then this is okay. That is the only question. Rest of the questions have been marked correct by the students. This is very heartening. Which of the following is an implied consequence of large reciprocal tariffs? Implied consequence of large reciprocal tariffs. So, if there are increased reliance on US markets, no, they will go away from the US markets. Diversion of exports by partner countries to non-US markets. This is going to happen. This is bound to happen. Strengthen the relationship between US and its lowering of trade relations, lowering of the strength of trade relations. Significant increase in US global export share. Protectionism rises, therefore there is no question of rising in global export share. This is okay. This is okay. Then, according to the passage, what is the relationship between magnitude of the tariff hikes and US export share? So, What is the relationship between magnitude of tariff hikes and US export share? How are they related? The tariff hikes and the US export shares. So negatively correlated. US has hiked the tariffs and the the share of those countries in US exports, share of those countries. So positively correlated as higher tariffs are imposed on countries where US is a key export market. Negatively correlated as higher tariffs reduce US export shares. Negatively correlated as higher tariffs discourage retaliatory actions. Positive correlation as higher. The correlation has to be positive. Now the question is whether it will be B or whether it is C. Logical correlation, relationship between magnitude of tariff hikes means 10%, 20%, 30%, and US export shares. So, and the kind of shares that export share is there. So, means one country is importing to the US and it has suffered a hike in the tariff. Then what would be the impact on that export share that it has? Positively correlated as higher tariffs are imposed on countries where US is a key export export market. And then another one is positively correlated as higher tariffs target countries with minimal exports to the US. So it will be obviously this one. Positive correlation between higher tariffs and US is key export market. So if you have a higher tariff that is coming in, then what happens to the US export share? Then US export share is going to decline, right? If you have a higher tariff, then or there will be a protectionism in the other country. Based on the author's argument, which of the following, if true, would reduce the decline in value of global trade? Reduce the decline in global trade means increase global trade. Would increase, would lead to increase. In India increases tariffs. This is not going to increase the global trade. This will decrease the
So
US reduce.
that's a new passage.
Sorry, I didn't
So
understand
that's
what.
new passage. That's new passage.
Okay, okay, that is a new passage. Right, right. Sorry, sir. Please read the passage and let me know.
So this passage talks about the Trump sweeping the reciprocal tariff, and it seemed to show the manufacturing and reduce the trade deficit, but their effectiveness is uncertain. And also, tariffs are bold and indiscriminate, impacting the China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and India, and also among other countries. And the global trade uncertainty arises due to unclear tariff calculations um, and the potential retaliatory measures and unstable trade policy. And the and India faces 27% tariff, while China, Vietnam, Bangladesh faces higher rates and making India export more attractive. India is far better than Vietnam, Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Electronic sector and the hardest hit countries are key player in China global value chain benefiting India. The removing the quality control order that act as a hidden protectionism would make India more investor friendly and also avoid the frequent tariff revisions and protect the agriculture tariff but lower tariff on non-food crop like soybean and maize to support the trade. And India should resist the protectionisms and embrace the trade reforms to become the stable and cost-effective protection hub. And also, global firms seek predictability. India can position itself as a safe haven amid trade uncertainty.
So this article talks about that the President Trump has introduced high tariffs on all U.S. trade partners, including its close allies, and this move has created uncertainty in global trade, and it could also disrupt supply chains and increase prices. But however, India may be benefit because the sorry because the US imposed lower tariffs on India compared to other countries like China, Vietnam, and Bangladesh, and uh, especially in the sectors like apparel and electrono reliable base for global companies. looking to shift away from China. And to make the most of this opportunity, the author suggests that India should lower and simplify tariffs to make trade easier, and it should also remove non-tariff barriers that discourage imports and investment in India. And India should ensure stable trade policies so that the companies can plan with confidence. And India should not follow protectionist policies, and instead, by staying open, predictable, and competitive, it can it can attract more investment and strengthen its role in global trade. That's all from my side.
Yes.
So this article is basically about the reciprocal tariffs that the Trump administration is implementing. So what it says is that the reciprocal tariffs are doing uh, something very opposite what the administration believes they are doing. So now the idea behind the reciprocal plan that the US is using is that what it believes that its trade partners are following unfair trade practices while trading with the US, and that the use of reciprocal tariffs will make the trade fair, and believes that it is right in doing so. However, if you analyze the tariffs that the other countries are imposing on US products, then you will notice that uh, these tariffs are usually lower than what the US is imposing on other countries, such as in the case of EU, Japan, Canada, making retaliatory tariffs against these countries rather counterproductive and harmful to the exposure the US has to these countries. And the dilemma this passage mentions is that while trying to fix this unfair trade that the US believes it is currently suffering through, using reciprocal tariffs is a good thing. But what it does is that it damages the exports the US has in these countries. As it imposes the tariffs on these countries, what will happen is that these countries will end up pushing away from the US and move sell their exports to other countries, as the US has around 13% of the global trade share in the trade volume, and through such a process, what will happen is that the US will simply get more isolated and further from the global trade. And what will happen is, in place of the US, other countries will take its place, such as, for example, China. And the end result is that US will lose its edge on the global market and thus the influence it has in other countries. And in turn, you could say this would simply make the US far weaker than it was previously. That's all from my.
Yes. So this is yet another article on the same topic, and those are U.S. tariffs. And in this article, the focus is slightly different. Whereas in the previous article, we had the author was of the view that the malady and the diagnosis are divergent. The problem is of a overvalued dollar throughout the world. Increasing demand of dollar keeps it overvalued all the time. So there has to be some prescription by which that overvaluation is lowered so that US exports become competitive. Now this article seems to be suggesting something in a similar vein. He says that look, the tariffs that the US is imposing make sense when actually they are when the tariffs that the other countries are more than what the US imposes on their goods. Now the tariffs are neither fair nor reciprocal, because fairness and reciprocity would have been there if the imports into the US and the exports from the US, if there is a correlation between the tariffs that are imposed on the imports, and if the correlation is arrived at and with the exports, then the article seems to make a startling finding that the other countries are actually imposing lower tariffs on the US products than the US is already imposing. So this is what the article suggests, which is somewhat delegitimizes the entire project which has been undertaken. If the US tariffs are lower than what the other countries are imposing on the US, on the goods made and exported from the US, then the entire argument that fair and reciprocal, the entire edifice of the argument is hollow and runs the risks of falling down. That is what is the central theme of this passage. Now, then there are comparisons that if there is a what is which region of the world contributes more to exports into the US and which contributes more. There are basically four countries with which the US exports are prominent, and those are the European Union, and those are the Japan, European Union, Canada, and the United Kingdom. These are the four countries where American merchandise exports are the most, and with the rest of the world, they are not that significantly prominent. So that is what the article talks about. And then there are certain peripheral issues that the article goes into. But the central theme is it delegitimizes the entire entire argument on fairness and reciprocity in tariffs. The rest is a matter of detail. Yes, let us. Having said that, let us come to the questions. First one is which of the following? This is correct, so I will not take it. Then second one is yes. Based on the author's arguments, which of the following, if true, would reduce the decline in value of global trade? So reduce the decline in value of global trade means what? Means increase global trade. What is going to increase? India increases tariffs on all imports. This is going to uh, be a protectionist measure and therefore it is going to reduce the global trade. The US reduces its reciprocal tariffs across sectors. If the reciprocal tariffs are not there, then it is going to increase the trade. Firms continue reshoring manufacturing to the US. This is protectionist, so it will not increase the global trade. Global firms prefer to pause. This is again protectionist. So this does not promote trade. This promotes uh, the national this thing rather than the world trade. Right. Then we come to all correct one. Which one of the following, if true, would most weaken the author's argument? Is this a new passage or the same passage? No, it is a new passage. Please come to the next passage.
So the article follows from the previous two articles. It talks about the reciprocal tariffs that the Trump administration is imposing, and it states that it asks the question that will protectionism defend its industries, or will liberalization attract the global trade to the country that's implementing the policy? So, in the case of US, the US is going with protectionism, is imposing reciprocal tariffs. It's trying to attract industries, but in doing so, we have seen that it's failing to attract industries and instead is distancing itself from global trade and therefore decreasing its leverage. What the article suggests is that India is currently has an opportunity to increase its growth, and that unlike the US, we can instead liberalize and we can liberalize our trade. We can reduce the tariffs we impose on other countries. We can offer a more stable country to sell to. Therefore, we can attract global firms and we can grow our export market, thus increasing our influence. Article basically says that India has the opportunity to become a safe haven for global businesses that the US previously was.
So this passage talks about the Trump reciprocal tariff. Leader Nixon's 1971 decision to suspend the US dollar gold convertibility, which disrupted the global financial system permanently. And the unilateral trade changes have instantly created global economic uncertainty, affecting the supply chain, export, and economic growth. The highest tariff will raise costs for the American consumer, reducing the demand and slowing global productions. And also, countries like China, Japan, India, and EU will face temporary economic slowdown as they adjust export strategies. And the dollar remain the preferred reserve currency. China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan now let advanced technology export. And the Trump protectionist policy may accelerate the American decline from its hegemonic economic position rather than restore dominance.
Yes.
So this article talks about the, as usual, President Donald Trump's new tariff policies. And this article says that on April 2nd, President Donald Trump introduced new tariffs on imports, creating global economic uncertainty. And this move is similar to the President Richard Nixon's 1971 decision to stop the US dollar from being exchanged for gold. And this exchange for gold basically disrupt the global financial system. And Trump's new tariffs are also creating uncertainty as they change the trade relationships that the US has built after World War II. And the US it was the largest importer of goods in uh, 2023. And it will now face higher cost for imports. And this will reduce demand in the US. And it would affect the other countries like China, Japan, India, and the European Union as well. And it would cause temporary decline. And the US no longer holds the dominant position in global trade, but still, back then the US accounted for 13 to 15% of global trade, while China's share was under 1%. And uh, but today, the scenario has changed, and China is the largest player in the global trade, and the US has slipped to around 10%. And this shift in economic power, along with the rise of other countries like China, Japan, and South Korea in technology, it suggests that Trump's protectionist policies they may have accelerated the U.S. decline from its once dominant position in global trade to its decline. That's all from my side.
So the article basically um, is a relatively straightforward article, and basically it says in the new or the changed scenario what India should be doing. That is the focus of the article. The author proceeds with analyzing what the US has actually done and how that those steps affect India, and then what should be India's policy response. These are the three limbs of the article. Basically, what the US done, what the US has done, we have already seen in the first two articles what the US has done. The US believes that the reciprocal trading system, the trading system, world trading system has lost its reciprocity. Why it has lost its reciprocity? Because they think that they most countries have resorted to foreign exchange manipulation by keeping their foreign exchange rates manipulated and not by actually allowing the forces of demand and supply to determine the foreign exchange rates. They have kept the dollar continuously overvalued, and because of the growing demand of dollar and because of the weakening US economy, this has created a very unsavory position for the United States, and hence they have started an exercise in which they want to overcome these manipulations. They say that there are tariff barriers and there are non-tariff barriers also. There are quota restrictions, and there are other ways in which the US goods are discriminated against, and US goods are becoming incompetitive. And if you factor in if you create their value and try to understand how much is the impact, then the author claims that the US perspective seems to be that the impact is three times the tariffs, the value of tariffs. If some country imposes 17% tariffs, then the actual impact, if other considerations of exchange rate manipulation and quota rationing is implemented, and subsidies are taken into account, and all those trade distorting factors are taken into account, then the impact, if seen in tariff terms, would be far higher than what it presently is, and it would be, according to the author, it would be several times the present impact. Therefore, it is essential that they neutralize the impact by actually first quantifying how much is the impact, and they have carried out an exercise in computation. How they have carried the exercise in the computation, this is not disclosed in the passage as to what are the assumptions based on which, and what data they have used in arriving at those computations. This is not disclosed in the passage, but they have come to a conclusion that look, there is a necessity of taking measures, and the measures that they have taken is the recourse to tariffs, the assessment of the present practices, which they feel that these are practices which are lowering the integrity of the international trading systems, global trading systems, and therefore they have to be factored in. And when they are actually factoring in, then they arrive at conclusions and start imposing tariffs on wherever they found that yes, there are hidden uh, hidden tariffs or non-tariff issues. Interestingly, when the when the relative impact of these measures, of these tariff-based measures to uh, non-tariff barriers erected by countries is comparatively analyzed, then we find that India seems to fare relatively better, particularly in apparel, and to a lesser extent in uh, in the electronics field, and pharmaceutical field has completely been left out. So to that extent, India has gained from all this. Then after giving certain statistics about how the other countries have fared in terms of imposition of tariffs, the author uh, comes to giving his suggestions, what he thinks India should be doing. India says that despite all provocation, India should not enter into this one-upmanship like China is doing. Instead of doing that, incidentally, today's newspaper item says that they have agreed on, they have, they have arrived at an agreement. The Chinese have arrived at an agreement with the Americans, so that part is also over. Anyway, he says that instead of indulging in this kind of one-upmanship, the what Indians should be doing is that they should keep their policy stable. They should not give policy shocks, and if they want to really uh, wean away business from Vietnam, in the sense of what the author says as Vietnam plus Bangladesh plus China plus. If you like that kind of thing happening to you, then you have to make your policy environment very stable, very predictable, very certain. Stability, predictability, and certainty invites trade. And knee-jerk reactions, ad hoc actions, quick fixes are very communicate a very depressing sentiment to the firms doing trade in any jurisdiction. Therefore, we should instead of yeah, following into the into the into the footsteps or into the pathways of what other countries are practicing. We should arrive at our cool analysis and keep our policies predictable, certain, and transparent. That is going to help us better in these economically uncertain times. So this is what the article basically talks about. Now let us examine what this is. Examine the questions. Um, 100%. Nowadays, I'm noticing that these questions on logical reasoning are more, you know, they are better response. There is a better response. I don't know whether you people are researching the question and then attempting the answer. Because research the question and then attempt, that will be very counterproductive. It can easily be done. And at our school, students are even more enterprising. What they do is when I send them a question paper, what they will do is they will suppose a student is absent, so they will enter into his account and submit his answer, so they immediately know all the responses. And so they will mark the answer thereafter. So this is very counterproductive, very counterproductive. This does not help anyone at all. So what we did, we disabled the responses. We don't give the responses at all to the students. We disabled the responses, so the responses are not displayed even if you resort to these tricks. But still, students have their ways of bypassing the system. Please don't do that. Let me give me the chance to be very happy that kids are responding almost all questions correct, which is very heartening. Please don't do those this thing, because then the entire the integrity of the system is gone. And mature people like you don't require that kind of monitoring. Now this is the stage when you're not boys and girls. Now you are almost men and women. So young men and women are there. So it is expected that you will behave with maturity and will not resort to those tricks merely to get a score in this, because that score has no value at all. Absolutely no value. That score is just a feedback that this is how we are doing, and that just like I have gotten this feedback from you that kids are really responding better these days rather than what they were doing in the past. I come to question number 23. Which of the following, if proved, would most weaken the author's arguments? So, China's trade share declines significantly over the next year. Weaken the author's argument. How is China's trade share related to what the author discusses? Author basically discusses what India should do, so that if China's trade share declines significantly on the next year, 1 year, that means it is strengthening the author's argument. That means China plus one strategy is working. So it doesn't really weaken the author's argument. The US gains global support for its new tariff regime. Now that everybody is criticizing the new tariff regime. Nobody is supporting the new tariff regime. World Bank praises US economic leadership. We don't know. World Bank whether praises or whether doesn't praise. So if suppose they are praising, then does it weaken the author's argument or strengthen the author's argument? Strengthen the author's argument. Asian economies grow despite rerouting supply chains. So Asia is unstoppable. So this weakens the author's argument or it strengthens the author's argument. This how does it impact the author's argument? Asian economies keep growing despite the rerouting of the supply chains. How will it help the author's argument? Author's argument, Asian economies doesn't. It seems to be tangential. Links are difficult to establish on what they are saying, that you have if you keep growing despite the present this thing, that means legitimacy of what the US is doing is not established. That is what. Then the fourth, if the impact is US gains global support for its new. So first, second, and fourth could one of them could be the correct answer. Asian economies grow despite rerouting supply chains. I mean, um, though the article does not really talk about, but what will be the impact on Asian economies keep growing despite rerouting supply chains? Asian economies keep growing, but then the article says that the article does not say that there will be a shift from Asia to Africa. This seems to be tangential, because Asia to Africa shift he is not talking about. He's saying among Asia itself, there can be a recalibration, in the sense that there can be China plus one, India, the Vietnam plus one, Bangladesh plus one, that kind of thing can happen. Therefore, he is not saying that Asian economies don't grow. That is not his argument. Despite rerouting supply chains. So Asian economy keeps growing. That doesn't seem to have any implication for this because the growth still remains in Asia, to my mind. Which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the author's arguments? Would most strengthen the author's arguments? All right. Other countries also begin to adopt progressive protectionist policies. This is going to strengthen the author's argument. Author's argument is what India should be doing, right? India should have a stable policy environment. India should be transparent. India should adopt reform. India should lower its tariffs. India should do away with non-tariff barriers and all that of which it is accused. So, India should give a measured response, but and not a knee-jerk response. And if other countries also begin adopting aggressive protectionist policies, does it go to strengthen the author's argument? The author argues that India should not do that. Other countries, what they do, he is not saying anything. Then he is saying American consumers show no change in demand. And the American consumers show no change in demand, then how does it strengthen the author's argument or does it weaken the author's argument? Author's argument is that they have reciprocal tariffs. They have more tariffs than what Americans have. Therefore, American consumers show no change in demand. Then it means uh, it weakens the author's argument. It does not strengthen the author's argument, right? Then dollar strengthens in the foreign exchange market. If the dollar is already overvalued, and if it further strengthens in the foreign exchange market, then it basically weakens the author's argument, does not necessarily strengthen the author's argument because the author's argument is the dollar is overvalued. If the dollar is overvalued, he says that foreign exchange manipulations are being done, and now he is saying the dollar is further strengthened. Now, if the dollar strengthens in the foreign market, further strengthens in the foreign market, this goes contrary to what the steps have been taken. Then China and EU form a joint trading bloc in response. Yeah, EU and China may form a joint trading bloc in response. And the first response, other countries also begin to adopt aggressive protectionist policies. Now, these two are basically the same arguments. But joint trading bloc. So, joint trading bloc is also a protectionist measure only. It is not free trade. Free trade requires certain. It has certain requirements that you should have a very great liberalization of duties. That is the require on almost all products, even including agricultural products, as agriculture is a sensitive item for us. So that is the requirement. Here he is saying China and EU form a joint trading bloc in response. That is protectionist. First one is also protectionist. The difference between first one and last one is that first one is on a global scale, whereas China and EU, this is on a lesser scale. That is the only difference. Therefore, if the first one is correct, the fourth one is also correct. If the fourth one is correct, then the first one has to be correct because the first one is on a global stage, whereas the second one seems to be on regional scale. Right. So which one would most strengthen the author's argument? Other countries begin to adopt aggressive protectionist policies. American consumers show no change in demand. So what is the author's argument that has to be strengthened? What is it that the author says that this is the argument which needs to be strengthened? Can you tell me what is the argument here which needs to be strengthened? What the author examines? Can you tell me this? What is the argument that is going to be strengthened? Just to test whether you have done it yourself or that you have taken support. But the way you are making presentations, I don't believe that anybody can make a presentation without understanding the nuances of an article. It is just not possible. So I'm sure you are doing and I'm happy that you are doing a hell lot of work in trying to understand and appreciate the article, putting a lot of pressure on your brains, and then trying to come up with solutions. Which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the author's argument? What do you say will be the correct answer? Let us have an open discussion on this. Yes, Ryan, what do you have to say? Question number 24. Which of the following, if true, would most strengthen the author's arguments? What do you have to say? Other countries also begin to adopt aggressive protectionist policies. American consumers show no change in demand. Dollar strengthens in the foreign exchange market. China and EU form a joint trading bloc in response. Which of the following, if true, would
The
most?
second
Yes.
option is tangential since it doesn't say anything about that. Third option may be opposite as to what the author says, since now the dollar strengthens isn't exactly said here, but does what the article does imply is that the American economy is not going to be that powerful, and thus you can say the dollar will maybe get weaker. So third option is also not correct. If we look at the first and fourth options, then we could say, for example, the fourth
They are
option,
more or
China
less the same thing. Yeah.
form a joint trading bloc in response. Now, you can say that if the China and EU does form a joint trading bloc, then uh, it will support the argument that the author is making, since the US will be left out from this, and both of these two will trade with each other, and therefore US will lose its influence in this sector. So that's correct, and the first option is also correct. Both of these
Yes.
support the argument.
Yes, Tanishka, what do you have to say?
So, sir, the first one where other countries are also follow the same strategy or adopt the protectionist policy and would strengthen
Mm-hmm.
the author's argument.
Mm-hmm. Why? The 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 taste. The taste is in the flavor of the argument. What is the argument? Why? Reason.
If we were to focus on the arguments themselves, we can see that the first argument is basically a response to what the author or the Americans are doing, and is most appropriate answer in terms of the paragraph, since the author is stating that other countries will also adopt similar measures, and therefore the US will be left out.
All right, all right. I want to hear from Tanishka.
One country impose the high tariff, then other also respond with their own tariff. So it also protect the
So there's a surge in the protectionist wave, which is unleashed by the United States. That seems to be your argument. Yes. What do you have to say, Priyanka?
So, in this passage, the author argues that the Donald Trump's protectionist trade policies, for example, imposing reciprocal tariffs, it could disrupt the global system, and the author also argues that the US may lose his dominant position in the world trade, and that's what the option A says, that if other countries also if other countries also adopt the aggressive protectionist policies, the US will automatically lose its dominant position. So the option A should be right option.
Yes, you people are correct. All of you have.
So I
Uh,
actually have a doubt.
yes.
Nowhere in the article is the author stating that other countries will adopt aggressive measures. We can say they will adopt aggressive measures, but
Yes. I'm
it
coming to. I'm coming to that. I could
doesn't say
understand.
that. And instead, if
I'm
you look at
coming
the
to that.
fourth option, then I believe the fourth option should be correct when instead of the first one, since the
Uh,
China
yeah.
forming trading bloc would be a more appropriate response, as if we go through the passage, since
Yeah.
it's that other countries that who are not exporting to the Americas will instead sell their exports to other countries, and fourth matches this one. So I think fourth is
All right.
the more appropriate answer.
All right. Look, first one is the appropriate answer. Why do I say that? Because you see what the author advises India. He says, please don't become protectionists. All right. Yes, they are protectionists. That is not a good reason for you to become protectionist. Irrespective of what other countries are doing, you become transparent, you become predictable, you become certain, you become more inviting to trade. Don't get into these knee-jerk reactions and quick fixes. If you do that, then you will not invite international trade. You will not. You have to become China plus one. You have to become Vietnam plus one. You have to Bangladesh plus one. You have to become Malaysia plus one. And you have actually missed the bus already. You did not become when you could have become a global production hub. You could have become, but you have missed the bus. Therefore, now don't do that. The US can afford or cannot afford, only future will tell. But then they have already lost on the international trade. On the front, on this front, they are already lost. Somebody else is leading now. They are not leading. Therefore, if you want to, you have this opportunity. Use this as an opportunity. When the world is becoming a more protectionist place, you don't become a more protectionist place. That is the central thrust of the argument. That is why I say first one is correct, right? I hope that answers your question, Rayan.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So now I go to assured that is only a word. Now, what is the meaning of hegemony? I'm not going to get into it. Then we have finished this for discussion of four articles. Tomorrow we will take up the 65th article, right? 65th mock paper. Any problems? Any suggestions? Anything in which
Sir,
we
sir,
can do?
can you suggest me some tips to improve my legal reasoning, as I am facing too much
Don't worry.
problems in legal
Don't
reasoning?
worry. Your legal reasoning will improve. Have patience, because legal reasoning, I give a lot of thought and then try to make it as complicated as possible. That is why you are facing so much problem here. If I keep doing this, then in the exam you will not have similar problems. So have patience, because I spend a lot of time in the legal reasoning portion, because that is one portion, legal reasoning, logical reasoning, where you purely practice. The more you practice, the more you learn. The more you practice, the more you learn. So have patience, and let the questions be more and more complicated, and let your responses be more and more. Just revisit. If you revisit the questions that I am giving, and if you try to just see, if you when it comes to some tips, try to understand that there will be a confusion of dates. You're following? There will be always be a confusion of dates. When did the policy come into existence? Most of the policies are prospective in their application. Means they apply from the date of their promulgation. They don't apply from the retrospective date. If they apply from the retrospective date, then it is stated in the policy. Following? One of the tips, since you have raised the question that how we can improve our legal reasoning score. So what the examiner is going to do is, suppose the policy comes into existence in 1990, he will frame the question in 1975. At that time, there was no policy. Unless the fact situation says that there is a retrospective implementation of this policy, it will apply only from the subsequent date. So that is one where you people usually trip over. That you can easily avoid. Just be alert. The moment there is a date, why the examiner is saying there is a date, there is something to it. Immediately be alert. When policy, I hope you are clear on this. I need not elaborate further on this, right?
Yes, sir.
That is one obvious aspect which comes to the mind when kids go wrong. Number second, point that I will make is that in legal reasoning questions, try to understand what is the essence. It's very easy to say this, but actually it comes only by practice. Try to understand the essence of the policy. Try to analogically reason out the logical extensions of the policy. If you logically extend the policy, does it create an absurd result? Then it will give you an indication of which way you should be going. Does it create an absurd result? If it creates an absurd result, in all likelihood that argument is incorrect. But this is slightly difficult to exemplify. I will exemplify. When we come to legal reasoning passages, I will tell you how you have to think. Because the more I tell you, the more you will come into my shoes. And the more you come into my shoes, the more it will become predictable for you. And I don't want you to become totally predictable. Don't worry. If it happens something like more and more responses are correct, you are second guessing every response. That's very nice. That means you are doing a very nice job out of it. So when the exact questions come, we will take them up, right? Instead of offhand, this is what came to my mind. So the question raiser itself has disappeared. She has come back. Priyanka, how is it that you are constantly, today you have not done it. Yesterday you are constantly coming and going out, coming and going out. What is this? Why do you do that?
Sir, network problem. They just kick out from class.
Why do you get dropped out? Very frequently, then drop out, drop in, drop out, that kind of thing. Anyway, any problem with the system stability and all that? I mean, the communication part and all that.
No, sir. Actually, my Wi-Fi is just having some problems from
Yeah,
last 3 days.
it gets dropped and then all right. All right. I can understand because if you are getting in almost instantly, then there must be some problem. Anyway, when we get there, I'll definitely show you the way in which legal thinking takes place. And once I exemplify in specific contexts the legal thinking that goes behind a question, then I'm sure that will definitely increase your uh, score in terms of legal reasoning, right? And you'll have to do a lot of work when it comes to current because we are not taking anything on current, right? And unfortunately, uh, we I don't think we will be able to take anything on current the way it is going, right? If something happens and we have to change our procedures, that is different. But otherwise, be careful about your current. Don't neglect that portion. That is quite an important portion. Current and English, very, very important. And we are not discussing anything there, presuming that you will be able to manage all that, right? So please be careful. Consolidation is the key in any examination, whether it is the CLAT examination, IIT, JEE, NDA, IAS, whatever is the exam. Consolidation is the key. If consolidation is not there, nothing will come out of all this. So better be careful. Consolidation, devote a lot of time to revisits, constant and aggressive revisits. ठीक है. See you tomorrow then.
The lecture series revolves around discussion of mock papers. You can request us for the concerned mock papers. If you intend to join us in our daily discussions, you are most welcome.